Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Noontime here at the FTN Network. I am Ryan Noonan, and I am joined by a dear friend of the show, the absolute best person to talk NFL draft with, in my opinion, because there's really no one out there that's, I think, is well versed in all the different moving parts of this. This guy is grinding closing line value at all the books. Lives in Jersey too, so it's nice. You get all the books over there. He is doing prospect modeling for dynasty drafts or whatnot. He is just as plugged in as they come. Anthony Amico, what's going on, brother?
What's up, Nooner? Just really, really gratuitous introduction there, man. I don't know if it's quite worthy of all that, but if you keep saying stuff like that, I'll keep going on. I don't know.
I probably fell short because I'll be honest. So I'm listening to Freeman's on, with Levitan and Silva. He's talking about, I heard this from Amico. I'm listening to Action Network today, and they're talking about, Anthony Amico is the guy for this. I'm like, dude, Anthony Amico, I know him. We're friends. I've known him for a very long time. That's my guy. So let's talk. I get the guy people are talking about on the other shows. I'm just going to get the guy. So let's do it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. That's really nice. When people say nice things about you, I'll admit that. And it's fun, man. This is the season. Like we were saying right before the show, like we do all this gearing up, and then it's like the 3 or 4 weeks before the draft, we're just pedal to the metal and having a great time. So let's live it up,
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to kick us off. So I think that this is a year that's different, similar to last year, right? Whereas a lot of these things become hearsay, and there are a handful of people, especially in the mocking community, it's such a growing community because we've been watching it for years with no skin in the game, and now all of a sudden we have the ability to actually put a little skin in the game. But it's very information based, especially as we ramp up here down the stretch. We're a little more than 2 weeks away with no actual combine where there's really that one collective meeting of the minds where you get a lot of late night conversations at the bar, after all this stuff going on at the combine. It's a little bit less where, you have these teams scattered with multiple pro days and things like that. How has that factored into your process? Or I guess talk to me a little bit about how you're trying to collect information as far as making some of these bets to find closing line value anywhere you can.
Yeah, so it's pretty funny because I thought last year everyone was like, oh man, it's gonna be so hard. Like, we shut down right after the combine, like we don't know what the deals with the pro days. And like I thought last year was kind of easy compared to this year, because last year, like with no sports, these books were just like putting out lines so early. I thought that they were pretty exploitable. We did already kind of have most of the information. And then it's like this year, we had half a college football season, like depending on what school you're looking at, like 5-6 games, stuff like that. Yeah. Like you said, no combine. Like I think that this year has been way tougher. A lot of the books have not put out the lines as quickly. They've been kind of playing off each other a little tighter. So I think it's been a little harder this year, maybe even a lot harder. But just trying to stick to the same stuff. I mean, I think that the mocks and grinding the mocks is as important as ever, because these are the people that are plugged in. I mean, Daniel Jeremiah, like he still has sources, like those people still talk to him and tell him stuff, the same thing with a guy like Peter Schrager, obviously like McShay, those guys. So I think just trying to stay true to like the original tenets of the process has been more important this year than ever. I've kind of liked the pro days. Like I think that the fact that it's been a little more scattered has made it more interesting. Kind of spreads out that like information, instead of it being just like a week of just like getting pounded with info. It's kind of spread out over a month or two, which maybe isn't necessarily favorable for betting, but it's been at least pretty interesting. Like it's kept me kind of into it. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, right now, like I have like 10 guys that like I just track all their mocks, and it's like every day I'm looking to see if they do an update. And every day I'm refreshing the books to see if they add any more props, because that's kind of what I'm waiting for right now.
Those 10 guys, a combination of maybe the insiders, they get, like you mentioned, Schrager, obviously McShay. You're not getting a mock from Scheffler, but if Schefter has a thought on something, Schefter's not in the business of missing. So like those things obviously carry weight. Is how do you kind of narrow down whose voice matters and whose doesn't?
So I try to just look at like who's done really well in the mock competitions in the past. So like, the Huddle report has like the 5-year average, which is pretty good. Fantasy Pros has a competition mock draft database. So most of the people that I'm following have done really well in those. Kevin Hansen, he used to be at Sports Illustrated. Now he's at, I probably have to like pull it up. I don't even know. EDS Football. Friedman from the Action Network, McShay, Jeremiah, Silva, Walter Football, Peter Strager, McChrystal over at Sharp Football, and Scott Smith, who's at Action too. So like those are the 10 guys I'm really focusing on the most. They do a decent amount of updates on their stuff. They're really plugged in, or like in the case, like, guys like Friedman and Scott, like they're just really good at synthesizing all the information. Like,
yeah,
they're doing kind of the same thing that I'm doing. So I like to kind of bounce what I'm thinking off what they're doing.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I think is your strength for sure is kind of, finding a way to process and filter it through into some, actionable ways to take advantage of books too. I mean, obviously, I'm here in Illinois, we have a handful, but we don't have all of them. And I think that's kind of the key. I think it's really just a key for anything we're doing in the betting space is having access to having a little bit of liquidity in as many places as you can to be able to shop these lines, especially in this instance, because obviously we're limited. I mean, we're probably not betting north of 4 figures, so we're not have to worry about limits per se, but you're seeing so many books that are they're different to act as far as with news breaks. So you want to have access to the best number. If you're doing all this work and you have access to all these books, it'd be silly not to take advantage of shopping the best number. So I know Silva was talking about a lot last year. He was feeling he really missed the combine. So interesting to hear that you thought it was a little bit easier last year. Be interested to hear what he thinks over the next coming days and weeks as we get closer, because we're kind of in the same spot as last year too. So we'll kind of just start through the top. And I mean, obviously it's a heavy quarterback draft. Not a whole lot to be said about what's going on at pick 1 with Trevor Lawrence. And I know we're not spending a lot of time and grinding tape as far as like prospecting. And if someone tells you that they are a quarterback whisperer and they have, the magic elixir for being able to tell you who is a home run at the position, they also have, there's a bridge in London I want to sell you too. But like, we know Trevor Lawrence is the guy. I want to talk. I am really surprised that Zach Wilson is a no doubt number 2 pick. I know a lot of people think the draft starts at number 3. Everything out there in the market will tell you that Zach Wilson is the guy. Is there any value in taking one of these other, Fields, Mac Jones, Trey Lance to the Jets at number 2?
I don't think so. I think this is a done deal. And I'm as shocked as you. Like I thought if there was going to be a no doubter at 2, it would be Fields.
Right. Same.
And then you start hearing the Wilson stuff. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like BYU, like I'm not really sure I get it. Like Fields has been so good at a major program, but that's their guy. And it feels like within the last couple of weeks, management for the Jets has been like hiding that like less and less and less. So it's not even really much of a secret. We had like the Steve Young thing where Douglas was just like, oh yeah, like, Steve's pretty plugged in with BYU. Like, I mean, they have nothing to hide. So it's not like, there's no, not really at a disadvantage to let us know. But yeah, I mean, minus 3,000 on FanDuel to be the second pick, Zach Wilson. Like I'm completely shocked, but I think that's it. I don't think you can lay 12-1 on Field, get 12-1 on Fields or 25-1 on Lance and expect to get anything out of it. Like just, if you didn't get Wilson at like 250 or less 2 weeks ago, like you're just kind of sitting on your hands.
Yeah. Just interesting to me. I mean, Fields did nothing except be what everyone thought he was going to be coming out of high school. Right? He was like 1A, 1B with Lawrence, goes to Ohio State, totally delivers in a primetime spotlight game against Lawrence, plays through, a rib back injury, just balls out, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Again, not grinding up, I'm trying to watch some of the, FF astronaut stuff and watch some film, but I have no idea what I'm watching, just like anyone else. We're football fans. We don't know what the play was. We don't know what the first read was, but it's so interesting to me that Fields really did nothing, I think, to hurt his case, and now is is really someone that is being talked about as slipping. So let's talk about where everyone thinks the draft is going to start. Again, Schefter doesn't shoot and miss a lot. And he's maybe backed up a little bit, but there seems to be enough out there. And he's made strong enough case for San Francisco taking Mac Jones. Now, again, we can get into the arguments around dad bod and, is this really a guy that you really want to bank your franchise on when you spent all that collateral to move up? You have a similar version in-house already under contract, I guess. I don't want to limit Mac Jones, but I don't necessarily know that his ceiling is far superior to what, everyone thought Garoppolo was going to be for a couple of years. What are we doing at number 3? Is there anything to Fields here, or is Fields just another guy, another spot he keeps sliding down? Have you been able to get on anything early there?
So I'm in a really good position on this because I got in on Mac Jones early at like plus 150, and I was able to kind of hedge out a little bit over the weekend. So I'm pretty much riding Mac Jones risk-free, which is, I think, exactly where I want to be, because right now it wouldn't completely shock me if they took Fields or Lance. I kind of think Lance is being actually a little undersold because I think he's like very much in play. If Fields is in play, he's in play as far as I'm concerned. But I still think that the pick, like everything that you hear, like you said, Schefter, I know he's walked it back a little bit. Jeremiah, Schrager, like name a major network, like their top guy is telling you he's hearing Mac Jones. And it seems wild because Fields just has like a way higher ceiling, you'd figure. But I mean, there is something to kind of getting your guy. I mean, a lot of the guys that I see on Twitter who like chart out these quarterbacks and some of the next gen stuff that you can get from PFF or whatever, like, they say that Jones has been really accurate. He's been really good against pressure. Like he might be just like a really good version of what Jimmy Garoppolo is. Like he might just be a better trigger man for the offense that they have right now. And maybe for them, they're looking at it and saying like, do I really want to redesign the offense to fit a guy like a Fields or a Lance when I can just get a guy that's a little better cost controlled and a lot better maybe right now than what we have in Jimmy G. I mean, I would like them to make that move and to take the guy who has the rushing upside, but I mean, maybe they're just not interested. I don't know. I mean, it's like this weird thing on Twitter because like I've never seen anything like this where like people are so confident in the fact that like the Niners are just like an impenetrable fortress of information. And they might be right, but it's just like I just never seen like, I mean, like people debate mock picks like up and down the board all the time. Like that's common. But like I've never seen in like a prominent spot with so much signal, people just being like, no, absolutely not. And I don't know what to make of it sometimes.
It is wild though, because it kind of, there's enough there where you're right. And it's moved the market. It's, DraftKings 3rd overall pick, Mac Jones minus 200 at this point. Like, there's plus 175 on Fields. Lance has fallen back a little bit at 3.25, but yeah, it's like the most arrogant draft pick of all time. There's Shanahan just being like, you know what? I don't even care. I can prove to you that I can get this done with a simply better version of what I currently have. He can execute what we want to do. And there's just a lot of mesh, close to the line of scrimmage stuff that they like to run. And
right.
I mean, I just think it's weird that Fields doesn't feel like he's not necessarily a running quarterback. He feels like a quarterback who can run. And I think that that's right. kind of what we've seen the position evolve into more so than your, Lamar's or, even Josh Allen. Josh Allen is willing to tuck in and run, but he's a freak athlete, but it doesn't feel like necessarily a running quarterback. I feel like Fields is the same guy. As a Patriots fan, dying for some sort of quarterback, I want Fields or Lance to continue to slide down the board. And that's kind of where we start to get into what happens, right? So let's pretend that we go along with what the books are telling us. We're going to go Lawrence, Wilson, and Jones to start. Obviously, number 4 is an interesting spot. The Falcons have kind of restructured stuff with Matt Ryan to make it think like he's there for at least the next year or two. There are some really, really dynamic playmakers and pass catchers already on that roster and on the board in the positions that seem to be set to go next. Have you taken anything with the Falcons, or what are your thoughts? What do you think they should do with that pick?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, in terms of what I think, like, honestly, I'm good with them just like taking Kyle Pitts and just getting every inch they can out of Matt Ryan, because I just think Matt Ryan can still throw. He's young still, kind of, for the, like, you can see a world where you get 5 more years out of Matt Ryan.
Sure.
And like at that point, like, why reset the clock if you don't have to? You have Julio still now, you have Ridley, like, you have all these guys, like, just try to play some better defense for a change, and like, you're scoring points, fine. So I'd be totally fine with that. I think that they're not going to take a quarterback. I mean, that's the most recent stuff that I've seen. I mean, Ryan McChrystal does a really nice job of like aggregating news and stuff for the draft at Sharp Football. And, he nailed it. I mean, Peter King reported that the Falcons are not going to force a quarterback with the 4th pick. Now, I mean, you have the 4th pick, and the first 3 picks are quarterbacks. So like, either there's a guy that they really want at 4, and if he's not there, they'll just, let it ride, or they're just really hoping that they can move the pick back. And if they can't, they're going to take a guy at 4. So if they take Fields, that's kind of like, that's trouble for me. But not huge trouble. I mean, I'm positioned on Pitts. I got Pitts to go there at good odds. I also have them to take defense first, like plus 475, because I just feel like if they move back, like, that's probably where they're going, because any trade back puts you like really in the mix for all these like top defensive players, primarily at corner, which they really need.
Yeah.
Surtain, JC Horn, those guys. So that's kind of what I'm expecting if they move back. So, and I have Trey Lance to go there at like plus 400, just like break even if that happens, because I do think some of the stuff earlier in the month was saying that that's actually their guy. I know that Fields has like the local angle, so I don't know how much truth there is to that, but yeah, that's kind of where I am. I mean, I think that there's nothing wrong with taking Kyle Pitts. I mean, he's the best player in the draft. Like, you just take Pitts at 4. Like, it's kind of like when like the Colts, I mean, they took a guard at 6, right? And then it's like, oh, like, should you take a guard at 6? Well, if he's playing friggin' Nelson, you can take him at 6, like,
yeah, it works.
So yeah, and we'll see what happens with Fields. I mean, like you mentioned this before, but Fields just feels like so Deshaun Watson-ish, in the sense that, like, he was a good prospect. All he did was win and be really successful. But there's like a couple things that people are nitpicking on him, which might not even be true, that push him back. I mean, for Watson, I think it was the arm strength thing. Like, team radar gun was like really big back then. And for Fields, it's like this reads thing, which, I mean, Ben Solak doesn't even think is true, because he charted it and he says that's not true. So yeah, so we'll see what happens. A bunch of people are mocking Fields at 4, which, I mean, concerns me. A bunch of people have him there.
I saw Freeman did that today. Freeman
did it today. So I don't know. I think Lance is maybe being a little shortchanged there, but at the same time, like, it's probably the right pick. Like, if they took Justin Fields, I wouldn't be like, oh, bad pick. Like,
yeah, there's so much just equity in being able to have that position. Like, you're basically losing the draft, even taking someone like Pitts, just like the opportunity cost of passing on the quarterback and what it's worth if it hits. I do think the Lance stuff is interesting, because he does feel like the maybe least day one ready guy, right? We're talking about small school, sat out basically played like a half last year. There definitely seems more of the project quarterback, and having maybe Matt Ryan there for a year or two. Again, you're also losing a little bit of the ability to maximize on that rookie contract thing. That's kind of the appeal of the quarterback, is really squeezing all of the juice out of that orange as you can in that first contract. So interesting that you're getting under 5.5 for Pitts on his draft spot over on DraftKings, which I think is interesting. I think that it's basically flat juice on both sides. I think that there's no way that that's the case as we get closer to 48 hours out of the draft. I think we'll definitely know what's going to be shaping up there. And I think your take on Atlanta taking defense is interesting too, because when you think about the teams that profile as the ones most likely to trade up into the spots into that 4 spot. You're looking at the Broncos down at 9. 9 is where you can start to really think you're going to see, the cornerbacks that you're talking about with, Surtain and Horn and things like that. And then, New England very much in play in there as well. Washington, you're definitely getting into these spots where if any of these teams decide to move up to address the quarterback position in the top 10, it definitely changes the profile of some value right now. You're not profiling a defensive player to Atlanta at 4, but if you trade back, I think that's an interesting way to look at that. So you got a pretty nice number there. Was it plus 475, you said?
Yeah, it's actually, I think it's 5-1 now on Fox. So I got
it's pretty smart,
I think I played it right, but I didn't get the best number. So we'll see. But I mean, your Pats, man, we've talked about it a couple times. Like, I believe they spent all that money in free agency. Like, I really think that, I mean, Bill strikes me as the kind of guy that maybe wants to see it play out first, 1, 2, 3. But I mean, they have all these assets, and that's really the position they need the most. I mean, I think they have a championship caliber defense, and they need to score points. They need to score points, and they're not going to do it playing 1950s football with Cam Newton. As much as I love Cam Newton, like, it's not going to happen. So I think that they're super, super live.
It was
I have
rough.
them 12-1 to take Fields, so I'm in on that.
Man, just got cold in here all of a sudden. I mean, I would love it. I would love it. I feel like Fields works as far as, like, to your point, like, not having to change scheme and system too much. Like, I feel like they can do some stuff that they wanted to do and had to do with Cam last year, and I would just love to see them address that position and take advantage of someone falling. I feel like maybe Atlanta is going to be a little rich for them to trade up, but I feel like be it the potential to get up into that spot at 7 with Detroit, positioning yourself to maybe get ahead of Denver at 9, see if you can get, pitch a better deal. And Denver's a team that very well could sit there and sit on their hands and have Trey Lance or someone fall to them, which would be very, very interesting to see for them. I mean, Lance feels like a guy, I know this is a loaded class, so but just feels like a guy that fits the current NFL profile. I mean, just massive, and maybe it's just a fantasy thing, right? We want to see a guy that's chucking, 30 plus touchdowns and running for another 15 to 16, but obviously concerns with limited starts, playing at, D2 schools, a little bit of a different beast, but we've seen it work in the past, and we've seen some no brainer dudes miss. So it kind of goes back to the point of, Josh Allen wasn't playing elite top level talent in Wyoming. And, we didn't think much of him coming out accuracy wise and had lots of questions too. And you get the right coaching, get him in the right system, and there's a lot to work with there. So be interested to see what happens. I don't think any of them fall out of the top 10. We'll wrap up the quarterback position. Is there a guy that jumps in? I believe the number's 5.5 for quarterbacks in the first round. And I believe it is plus money. First round totals here. 5.5 quarterbacks, minus 400 for under 5.5. We obviously have these 5 that are locks. Anyone slipping in the back half of the first round to take a Trask or Mills or someone like that? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I really don't think so. I know Schrager had Davis Mills going at pick 32. I got to be honest. I don't think that as long as Tom Brady's there, they're not spending a first round pick on anything that doesn't help them win now. So I don't think that's happening. And I mean, listen, teams do stupid stuff every year, but every year we try to convince ourselves that some guy is going to go at the back end of the first round, and he goes like pick 75. So I just kind of think that that's what's going to happen. I don't know if I want to lay the wood on minus 400 per se, but I mean, that's ridiculous. Like, I just don't think I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, the receiver class is something I know you've been really invested in. You do a great job at trying to find comps because, again, similar to quarterback, it's really hard to try to find, comps for these guys to have an understanding of a little bit of their makeup and what they project to be. What are your thoughts? I know last year was a loaded class. What are your thoughts of this class in relation to that one? And then some of the, any of the draft bets you've already made in relation to wide receivers.
I mean, I think it's a really good class. I think it's really deep. maybe not as deep as last year, but very, very deep with guys who are going to produce at the top end. I mean, I would say Chase, Waddle, Marshall, probably Smith just by default. Like, those guys have pretty big ceilings. I don't know if like that next wave of guys has as high a ceiling, like the Moores and Bateman. Like, I think that those guys are just people you can plug in your offense tomorrow and they can play and be productive. But I don't know if they're like ones. Like last year we just had a ton of alphas, obviously Jefferson, but like even T Higgins in the second round, like, I mean, CD Lamb, like they were just dudes in last year's class. So I don't know if the dudes level, like, to be very professional about this, right? The dudes level is not as high this year, but I think that it's just loaded with guys who can play. So I mean, I think that in terms of like the top couple of guys, like I have Chase under 6.5, which I feel pretty good about. I don't know if he's really going to make it past Miami. It sounds like Cincy might just want him, and like regardless of who's there, they're just going to take him, which I would completely understand. Obviously, I mean, you get like that day one chemistry. I think that's kind of like underrated. Oh, well, maybe it's not underrated because we talk about it all the time, but it's like it definitely matters. So I feel decent about 6.5, but if he doesn't go in the top 6 picks, I also have Chase to go to Detroit, and their receivers are maybe the worst in the league. So if he gets there at 7, like that's where it gets interesting to me, because I think Detroit is a really good trade back spot, like you had mentioned earlier. But if Chase is there, they might just pull the trigger on that because they really need a receiver, and he's the best one.
You don't want to go to battle with Rashad Perryman and Tyrell the Gazelle?
I mean, no, I can't say it. Yeah,
yeah, it's really bad.
So, I mean, I have, and I'm 10-1 on Waddle to be the first receiver, just because if the Bengals don't take Chase, like I could see a scenario where Miami takes, does basically what Cincinnati would have done, which is take a guy that is familiar with Tua, and I think Waddle's the guy if they do that. So I thought 10-1 was decent. I think that's still out there. I think FanDuel had 10-1 over the weekend too, so might still be able to get that. But yeah, not a lot going on with the receivers. I mean, I'm under 12.5 on Waddle too, I'm pretty sure. So they haven't really released a lot of props outside like those top couple guys, and I'm a little scared of Devontae Smith because I can kind of see him going all up and down the board. So I don't have like a ton. I don't have a ton on the receivers.
That's a big one. Smith feels like he can be. You can see the case to your point with obviously the Tua corollary there with him going to Miami, but then he also feels like a guy that could slip down the board. He's obviously already proven to be an outlier. There's just not a lot of receivers winning the Heisman, and obviously he produced, and it helped that Waddle was out and he took advantage of that and all those opportunities. But like, there are not a lot of dudes built like him that have profiled and gone on to have massively successful careers. Do you believe that he's an outlier, or do you think that there's something to be said for that? Like, is that just a little bit noisy? There just haven't been a lot of guys that have maybe been this good, that size.
Yeah. I mean, I think regardless of if he succeeds or fails at the next level, like he's an outlier, just like you said. Like, I mean, he's between the size, the career arc, like the context of that career, like the guys he had to play with. Like, I mean, he's as a freshman, he's playing against, Ridley and all these dudes that went last year, and he's playing with 3 first-rounders up until this season. Like, it's so hard to like give him an honest eval from the stuff that we do, the stuff that I do, at least the box score stuff. Like, I mean, it's almost unfair. But I just think that it's like he just has such a wide confidence interval. Like, I would believe so many different outcomes for him. So I mean, from like a fantasy perspective, that kind of just makes me pull the reins back, because I'm like, if I feel a little bit better about like a Chase or something like that, like I'll just do that. But for the draft perspective, I don't know. I mean, literally like 12 months ago, Henry Ruggs went like 10 picks ahead of Jerry Jeudy, who like massively outproduced him and was a Blitnikoff winner and was like 20 years old.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, this is not that much different than that situation. I mean, teams just really, really like speed, and Waddle has it. So.
Yeah, I was interested to hear you mention one guy in particular, because you mentioned last year was a class full of dudes. And one of the dudes that is still my dude, who I think is going to be an alpha, is Michael Pittman. And I'm trying to find a guy this year that is just kind of my guy that I hone into. And I think that it's going to be Terrence Marshall. is a guy that just seems to be a little bit disrespected.
Yeah.
As far as where I'm seeing going the mock and what I think he is. Really, the production at LSU 2 years ago with Jefferson and Chase, obviously that's Joe Brady offense. That is, Joe Burrow. There's a lot of things going on there, but Marshall seems like a absolute stud at the next level. What are your thoughts on there? Or who's the guy that I'm missing that maybe is kind of off my radar so far?
No, I mean, if Marshall, I think has maybe like the second or third highest ceiling in the class, like, because he's one of the few guys that has like the prototypical body build, and you still kind of need that. I mean, you can, like, I love Rondell Moore. Like, Rondell Moore is not going to be able to do some of the stuff that these guys can do, and that kind of limits his upside ultimately. So a guy like Marshall, who runs in the 4.4s or faster, who knows? He's like 6'3", and like you said, he played with all these guys and managed to still produce. And then this year with the opt out of Chase and kind of having the offense by himself, he ripped it. I mean, he played really well. So I like Marshall a lot. I feel like the context that you'd have to apply to like a Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle, like you still have to give Marshall that same, maybe not to the same degree because it's not 3 first rounders. It's only two. But yeah, I mean, he has, I would imagine, I think, a lot of untapped potential. And some of the guys that he comps to just on his profile right now, I mean, I see T. Higgins in there. Michael Pittman is his number 9 comp in my system here. So if you want your Pittman, I think I think he's it.
Love it. Yeah, I feel like those are the two. I feel like those are the receivers. I feel like it's the 2 Alabama guys, the 2 LSU guys, and then I think everyone else is. There's some dudes that are in there. You mentioned Bateman, I think is going to be a stud, and there's some other guys there too. But it feels like there's a lot of slot type guys, which isn't necessarily fair. The way that the NFL's play nowadays, we're not talking about Brandon Stokely's. We're talking about some really dynamic guys that play a lot of snaps in the slot. Allen Robinson plays a lot of snaps in the slot, but just a lot of smaller guys that aren't necessarily, like you said, can't necessarily win the way I think Marshall, the way I think Pittman can win down the line when they start to really grow into the role and get a little bit more comfortable in the NFL. Waddle and Smith on DraftKings have a over under at 11.5, and it feels like there's some value on the overs there. Like they continue to maybe slide down. You're seeing a lot of mocks. One of those guys landing at like 12 to Philly or something like that. Does that sound like there's any value there to you, or is that something that you're watching?
Yeah, someone was asking me about that today because like I said, I got Waddle at 12.5, and that 11.5 number scares the daylights out of me because I think Philly's kind of the floor that you would expect. I mean, and if both those Alabama guys make it there, which is possible, then obviously one of them is going to slip even further. So I think if I was going to go over on one of them, it would probably be Smith, just because I do think that I just feel like there's going to be this buzz on Waddle within the next couple of weeks because he just seems like the kind of guy that teams like. But I'm more comfortable than anything, honestly, just staying away because I already feel like I'm kind of well positioned. But you can get Waddle to the Eagles or Smith to the Eagles on Fox if you want that, because they have a bunch of team to draft player props over there. So, I mean, Smith to the Eagles is 3-1. Like, it's not necessarily a good value, but Waddle is plus 550, which I kind of like. So.
Interesting that we're starting to hear a little bit more of a shift, or at least I guess, second name in the mix at offensive tackle. It was basically Penei Sewell's been the guy that just was a no doubt. He's just going to be the guy. And there's arguments that like he's going to be locked in as like the second best prospect in this class, heading into last year, and just seemed like a no brainer. And now we're getting a lot of talk from some of these reputable, sources that you're referencing that I know you're looking at about Rashawn Slater, a guy who didn't even play last year. Talk to me about that. Is there any value there? I know we're looking at 6.5 as the over under on Sewell, who obviously a lot of people have penciled in or have had penciled in at 5 to Cincinnati for a lot of this process. Do you think there's anything to that actually Slater could be a guy that could bypass him as first tackle off the board?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's possible because I think once you get past Cincinnati, or even with Cincinnati, like the thing that you may end up in a situation where now teams are just looking to get the guy that's the most ready from day one. And from a lot of the stuff that I'm reading, it sounds like teams think that might be Slater because he can play guard. He's just like a little more refined, and like Sewell is the guy where they're like, well, he's just kind of like a really good athlete, and we think he has this high ceiling and all this stuff. So like if you're Cincinnati and you're going to take a tackle, I get why you would take Sewell, because you're just like, this is our long-term investment. Like we want him to protect Burrow for the next 15 years. Like that's it, no discussion. But if you're a team like Carolina and both of those guys are there, I can see why you choose Slater, because you're like, we need to protect Sam Darnold this second. Like we don't really have time to let this guy develop. We need a guy that can be a little more multiple up front, because maybe we need him to play guard a little bit, stuff like that. So I definitely think that there's smoke, that there's fire to that smoke. I have Slater plus 450 to be the first offensive lineman taken. I really don't want to go any shorter than like 4-1 on that, which I'm not sure is still out there, because I know a bunch of places brought it to like plus 350 over the weekend.
Yeah, all I'm seeing is plus 320 on FanDuel.
Yeah.
So some of that value might be gone.
Yeah, and the Sewell over under is moving, because it's been 5.5 for a long time, and I'm over on that, and now you just said it's 6.5, so that's signal to me too. I mean, I think that like for so long we're just like, the Bengals need offensive line help, the Bengals need offensive line help, the Bengals need offensive line help, but like they can still get that in round 2. Like they pick in the top of round 2. It's a deep offensive line class. They really need a guard. Like they don't necessarily have to take a tackle, because they have Jeremiah, I forget his name. I mean, I don't study the offensive line, but they have a guy they took in the first round like 2 years ago who's been decent, that they already said they want to be the left tackle this year. So then it's like, okay, you're going to take a right tackle? It's like, well, we have Riley Grief who can play right tackle. He could also play guard. He could play guard at Iowa, but like he's our right tackle. So it's like, okay, do we want to take Sewell, who like maybe we play him at right tackle, maybe we have Reef play guard, maybe we have Sewell play guard, or like, are we just going to take Jamar freaking Chase, the best receiver in the class, who's like who our quarterback wants, like is probably begging us for, and we'll take like Alex Leatherwood or something in round 2 and make it work? Like, I don't think it's a terrible decision to take Chase. Like, I really don't. And if you believe the stuff that you heard with the Eagles, which is that the reason Philly moved back from 6 is that they believe that the Bengals will take Chase. I mean, I think that those pieces match up pretty well.
It's interesting. Yeah, because it is a, we talked about the receivers and some of the question marks and maybe some guys that could be going late first and then, into the second round. Feels like a pretty deep, when you look at multiple round mocks, there are a lot of offensive linemen in the first 2 rounds. So you get into, once you get past Slater, looking at just odds on FanDuel, Vera Tucker, Darius Shaw, Mayfield, Cosme, Jenkins, Leatherwood, like you mentioned, the other kid who played at in North Dakota with Trey Lance is also right in that mix too. There's like 9 or 10 guys that are right there in it. And yeah, it just seems like you can address the starting position in the second round and maybe get this guy that is a game changer at a game changing position, whether that's, Pitts, if he's still there, or someone like Chase. It'll be really interesting to see what the Bengals do there for sure. How about the defensive side of the football before we jump in? I'm going to do running back to close it up. There's a bunch of corners that profile to be, day one starters here. A couple guys that their dads played defensive back in the league. Patrick Surtain, you have Asante Samuel, JC Horn, his dad played receiver for years. There are a lot of guys that can ball out. Interested to hear what your thoughts are at the cornerback position, or any bets you've made.
I mean, I'm perfectly positioned at corner because I got Surtain at plus 110 and I got Horn at 8-1. So I'm pretty much set there, because like right when the Farley stuff happened with the surgery, I was just like, all right, bang, like what can we get? And that was when I was able to get on those guys. So I'm in good position. I also have Horn to be first defensive player at 20-1 because yeah, well, I mean, I thought the number was good obviously when I took it, but I think that there's not as big of a gap between Surtain and him as is projected in the odds. Like, I think if you look at a lot of the mocks, like these guys go within 2 or 3 picks of each other. Sometimes Horn goes first. And the corner stuff, for me, a lot of that ends up coming down to scheme, which again, I don't really know a ton about. Like, I'm not going to tell you who fits where, but just based on the stuff that I read, like I could see a scenario where a Dallas or a Philly is the first to take a corner and decides that Horn is the guy. I'm not saying that that'll happen, but I think that like for the odds, it's plausible. I'm not sure if I would move on the odds right now, just because like I mean they've moved those guys so much. Surtan's like, what is he like? You have to lay like 2-1 probably on him still, right?
Yeah,
To be the
minus
first corner.
230,
Yeah,
230 on
so
FanDuel. Yeah.
on DK minus 305. Like and they don't, the stuff that they do with these props is so funny because it's like Surtan's minus 305, but Horn's only plus 200. So it's like you're not really getting a lot of value there at that point. And it's really just between those two guys. I know that Farley's medical seemed like it was okay over the weekend, some of the stuff that was being said, but it seems like the damage is kind of done there in his draft stock. Like when these other two guys are also freak athletes and they played and they tested and all that stuff. So yeah, I think it's definitely between those guys. And we'll see kind of who goes first. I mean, it sounds like Dallas at 10 is the spot where everyone's projecting Surtan to go. That's where everyone thinks a corner will go. We'll see if maybe a team like Carolina or Denver decides to pull the trigger on corner before that and what they would do. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we didn't get any defensive players in the top 9 or top 10, just with how stacked this class is on offense.
Yeah, it's interesting. Someone's going to get a baller in Caleb Farley if he's okay. If he ends up checking out, I mean, he seemed to be kind of a no doubt. And again, dialing it back to this time last year, as soon as the draft ends, the McShays of the world have to release their next year's mock, and Farley seemed like a no doubt top 5 pick at the position. Obviously, a couple of back surgeries makes you pretty nervous. You're investing massive capital early in the first round on a guy, but someone late first is going to probably get someone that is just kind of a cornerback one. These three are very interesting. And you get Newsome from Northwestern, and your over under is 4.5 on DraftKings for corners taken. Seen multiple mocks that have Campbell, Sunday Samuel Jr. and Eric Stokes kind of right around there as well. Any thoughts about a lean on 4.5 at the cornerback position?
Yeah, I think that number's right. I mean, I think that at this point, 4 is basically a lock because you're going to get the two guys at the top. I think Farley still goes in the first round, and Greg Newsome is feeling more and more like a lock every single day. I mean, he's like firmly in the 20s, I would say, at this point. And then it's just a matter of like, are you going to get a Tyson Campbell? Are you going to get Aaron Robinson, like one of these guys, Samuel, who you mentioned? So if I was going to lean one way, I'd probably say over, but I think that 4.5 is probably a good number. I have 3.5, so I'm feeling good about that. But yeah, it's a good first round for the corners. I mean, like I said, I think you have 4 solid. Samuel seems to me like the most interesting one because I do feel like these teams add like a little premium to the guys who have like the bloodlines.
Totally.
And that's just like, I mean, if you're picking into the first round, you're like, we need a guy that can play tomorrow. Like, who can we get? Like, he seems like the guy that you would take because I thought the big question on him was like his speed, like the stuff, the measurable stuff, and he tested pretty well, I think, versus what people expected. So I could definitely see him being like a back end around 1 guy.
Not too many guys in these home pro days have tested poorly this year, which is
that's true.
Interesting to see.
Well, I mean, unless like, I mean, we're going to talk about the running backs, but I mean, my goodness, like, can these running backs get some of the advantages that these skill guys are getting? Because friggin' Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, like, we're running the 4.5s, and I'm like, you guys can't like get the faster stopwatches out in North Carolina. Like, what are you guys doing?
They couldn't run at Penn State. Why didn't they go over to Penn State to do their pro day? Incredible. Yeah, so let's talk about running backs. There's not a lot from a draft prop standpoint here because there's really 2 guys, and I think there was maybe a little bit more of ATN steam in the last week or so. It really seemed like Najee Harris was kind of the runaway first back. I think we've seen some movement there. Harris on FanDuel minus 170 to be the first running back off the board. Etienne plus 150. I think Javonte Williams is really the other guy that's kind of in that tier. Some say maybe it's even just a 2, and then Williams may be in his own tier plus 500. Any thoughts around? I think what is it? Is it a half running back in the first round? Do you think we see one of these guys go?
I mean, when I mocked it, I had no running backs. I know Friedman had no running backs today. Like, it just seems very plausible that there would be no running backs. I mean, that the teams that you would expect to be in that mix the most are the Jets and the Steelers. And I mean, Rob Saleh is coming from like the ultimate running backs do not matter coaching staff.
Very true.
And his offensive coordinator is coming from the same place. So like they signed Tevin Coleman. They have a couple guys that played for them last year. Like, I don't know if they necessarily need to dip their toes in that water in round one when they have so many questions on defense. They just drafted a quarterback. Like, just drafting a running back really help you get Zach Wilson ready. Like, I don't really know. And then the Steelers like never take a running back in the first round. It took Mendenhall there, but that was like 10 years ago. And I mean, they're like true blue, like they take an edge rusher, I feel like, before they take a running back, you know? So I don't really know if we're going to see it. I mean, the team's late in the round one. I mean, Tampa Bay just signed Gio Bernard. They seem to be out. I know a lot of people in Buffalo want them to take a running back, which I don't really understand, but I don't think that they will. And if they do, maybe it's Javonte Williams, because they love like the forced mixed tackles guys. And he's like, you know, he's the dude in this class that does that. So yeah, it's I think that if I was going to lean one way, I'd probably go under, especially since I think it's plus money still in a bunch of places. They have it at 1.5 on Fox, but it's like minus 350 under, which is, I mean, maybe you just lay it because it feels pretty good, but I don't know. I mean, last year's running back class was just so much better in terms of the players, and all those guys went day 2. So I just have a hard time believing that a bunch of them is going to go day 1 now when the class isn't as good. Granted, like the overall draft class may not be as good, but I still don't know if that pushes running backs into round 1. It does seem like teams are getting a lot smarter with that.
Yeah, we're starting to believe that the running backs don't matter. Plus 175 on DraftKings for 0 running backs in the first round, which is interesting. So let's talk about them as prospects. I kind of try to cap it a little bit with making it, you know, those three guys. You mentioned Williams being kind of an elite breaking tackles guy. You know, Harris and Etienne, we know, have the pedigree and it performed. I know you do a lot of work in trying to comp these guys for the next level. Does that kind of check out in your process? Are they far and away better than everyone else in the class?
Oh yeah. I mean, not even a question. They just don't, I mean, like those first 3 guys, and really, I mean, I'd probably even say the first 2, because Williams is just, he's not going to be a pass catcher at the next level. Like, he's probably just not. He could be, but he's probably not. So I would even maybe take him out of it. I mean, teams would still maybe like that, but from a fantasy perspective, I would take him out because Harris is 230 and can catch, and had like an incredibly efficient career at Alabama. I know it's Alabama, but like, if you do put on the tape, like if you put on, when I say tape, I mean the YouTube highlights. You put on the YouTube highlights. He has some sick plays for a guy at 230. So like, to me, he's the guy. And then Etienne, it's kind of like, does he go to a place where a team gives him the work? Because the thing that I've been thinking about the most, and I've been spending, I spend time thinking about this like every night. I'm just like, I don't know where these guys go anymore. The position is so saturated that like, I don't know where they go that they're getting a full workload in week 1 or at all this year. Like, again, like Pittsburgh is probably the place, but they still have like a bunch of guys that they've drafted the last couple of years that would maybe be in that mix. And they just signed Kalen Ballage, who every team seems to love. But like, outside of those couple teams, like, where do they go? Where are they going to get a ton of work? Like, there's really not anywhere out there to do that.
You're right. I think Pittsburgh, the Jets, and I think Miami probably addresses it. Again, they have a ton of capital. I don't think they necessarily do it too early, but you never know. I feel like if they really locked in on one of these 2 guys being their guy, I mean, they add someone along with Myles Gaskin. I feel like if it's a Harris or Etienne thing, I feel like they can carve out a role. But it is interesting, and obviously it matters probably more than any position, especially in the fantasy game. You know, projecting workload is where do they land and what does the backfield mix look like. You could have made a case for Arizona, but Arizona probably watered and muddied the water a little bit by adding James Conner.
Yeah.
But and it's an interesting point as far as, you know, how high these guys go in fantasy drafts, and really where can they have a role? Because we are in best ball season. We're active now. You know, the more the degenerates start to creep in after the draft, and they want to feel a little bit more comfortable. But we are live to go, and some of these we're having to make some decisions on these guys without knowing their landing spots, and sometimes that works out really well. Like I had a lot of, CEH 7th and 8th round shares last year
Oh,
from
baby.
early April that worked out quite well, but you just never know. You can have guys land in spots where they are just absolutely dusted from the jump. Who am I missing in the next tier? Again, I'm asking you to do the impossible because we don't know the landing spot, but just who are in your work, maybe do you think is a guy that really profiles it, maybe having a really nice role in the next level, or even a 3-down role at the next level if he happened to fall into the perfect scenario?
I mean, I really like Kenny Gainwell. I feel like everyone does though, so that's not necessarily like a surprise. Like he feels like a guy that's gonna break my heart. Like he kind of just feels like the next Duke Johnson. But I love the guys who can catch the ball from day one and have been efficient. So I'll say Gainwell, but I'll try to be quick. Trey Sermon is definitely growing on me from Ohio State. He profiles as someone who could potentially be like a 3-down guy in the right situation. Again, like I think for all these guys, we're really talking about players who can see big roles after atrophy has kind of taken its course. Like Trey Sermon goes to a place like Atlanta and like Mike Davis is hurt and I don't even know if Ito Smith is still there, but like, whatever, like he has the backfield to himself. Can he do it? Yes. I think so. And the two guys like super late that I really like. I love Jarrett Patterson out of Buffalo. Didn't catch a single pass this year, so maybe I shouldn't as much, but like they were just so run heavy, like really bad quarterback play. And he was a workhorse for them. He's a little smaller. He's only 195, but a little Darren Sproulsy in the sense that like the small workhorse backs are the guys that I like because you assume that they'll have some kind of receiving role early or some kind of like spell role early. And then if that A back goes down, now all of a sudden, can they handle the load? I think the answer for Patterson is yes. Remains to be seen, I guess. We'll find out. And then kind of on the flip side of that, Demetric Felton, who I guess technically could end up being a receiver, but I think he's going to go like that Theo Ritter path and be a running back. And that's kind of exactly who I'm expecting, like just a guy who can come in, he's going to get his catches. If he's in the right spot, he could catch 50 passes or something like that. Maybe not in year one, but like kind of working his way into an offense. So there's really not a lot to love in this running back class. Like we're really just hoping that guys can find roles and prove themselves. Last year, obviously, was just like, we were so fortunate to have those guys. But now because those guys are there, like there's not as much opportunity for these guys and they're not as good. So we have to kind of wait and see.
What's the story with Chuba Hubbard? Feels like he was a guy last year that everyone was shocked, pulled out and didn't go into the draft. And now he is just kind of feels like a forgotten guy. Did he stumble so poorly last year? Or, he didn't even play. Like what was the scenario?
Yeah, I guess we know why he didn't come out. He must not have gotten the grade that he wanted. But yeah, talk about silly. Like 9 months ago, we're in our dynasty leagues. We're like, if Chuba Hubbard enters the supplemental draft, like what are we gonna do? Because this guy is important, And yeah, like he had 600 rushing yards in 7 games, and we're like, okay, like we don't really know what to do. So
yeah,
the tested speed wasn't good. He's not huge. He's like 210-ish or whatever. So I don't know. He could surprise. He has done it before, like he was a 2,000-yard back in college, which is incredible. But I don't usually like when a guy's last season is his worst season, and that's what it was for Hubbard. So I'm very bearish, I think, right now,
especially at running back. So
yep.
All right, I appreciate you coming on, man. Before I let you go, anything that we can bet on now, anything you bet on today that you think is something we need to move on before that line moves?
Ooh, good question. So depending on what books you have, I'm still on Kwity Paye to be the first defensive lineman selected. This has moved huge at a couple of the books. Like on DraftKings now, it's minus 200. FanDuel's like minus 145. But I think on Fox and William Hill, you can still get it minus 110. So I like that value for now. I think that's going to continue to move because kind of like what we were saying with Farley, however you pronounce it earlier, Jalen Phillips, who's like, seems like his main competition, huge medical red flags, like retired from football basically as a sophomore at UCLA and then transferred to Miami. Now, obviously wish him the best. The guy's a freak when he's on the field and he stayed healthy this year. But those guys tend to slip in the draft. So I think that Kwity Paye in good position, minus 200 is probably the right number. So if you can get that at minus 110, I'd really like it.
Nice. Yeah, 145 available on FanDuel. But yeah, shop your books and look around for that one. And I thought wasn't it like Russo was the end from Miami, and then all of a sudden we have a pro day and it's Phillips. This stuff can move so fast.
Yep.
So that's why you're the guy, because I know that you were absolutely plugged in. So I wanted to congratulate you. I know you just made a change and I'm going to be having some work done over at Football Guys. Tell everyone where they can find your stuff this season.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be doing, I think to start mainly I'll be doing projections and hopefully some articles and stuff for them too. We'll see about tools. The Football Guys thing is cool, and I appreciate you bringing it up just because it's we'll see where it goes. It's not like I didn't take it to do a ton of projects right up front. It's kind of just like we'll see where the work needs to be done, and I'll contribute where I can. So I'm happy to be there and to be part of their team, because those are guys who I read for the last decade and a half. So yeah, it'll be fun, and those are just good guys, and I'll probably still do a couple of things over at the Substack just to keep the personal anecdotes going, or maybe anything that doesn't fit over at Football Guys we'll get over there. So yeah, I mean, just follow on Twitter and we'll keep pumping stuff out.
Love it. At Amixta on Twitter. If you don't already follow, you probably already do, but definitely make sure you do that. Did you get a hollow pack yesterday?
I did not, but I got a Luka in my rebound pack, so I feel
nice.
Time well served.
Nice. I got a low cereal Korkmaz, so that's just as good as getting a LeBron hollow, I think. Right? So,
definitely.
Get a Korkmaz in the 200s is the same as cashing in an automatic 25 30K. Oh, the Top Shop grind. Amico, you're the man.
Man.
What's that?
We'll get it next time.
Next time
we'll just get the AI run it back or something. We'll be fine.
Dude, I'm running so bad on packs. I have so much regret of getting in early, and packs are just available always. And I was like, why would I buy a pack?
Yep. I know.
Like, I can get all this Series 1 stuff. Like, why do I want all these packs? And yeah, now I only get the pre-orders. So it's all good. It's all good. I'm still loving the grind. So all right, that does it for this week's episode. I'm sure we're going to be talking lots of NFL draft over the next few weeks. Don't forget to check out all the great stuff we have going on over at ftnbets.com. You can use promo code Noonan to get you 10% off over there. Lots of great stuff coming up as we ramp up here in the off season. There is no off season for football, so we keep grinding here. So for Anthony, I'm Ryan. We'll see you again soon. Thanks.